Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Bob Keaveney and Peter Levin.
Great, that's great. Hello everyone, I am Bob Keaveney. I'm the Editorial Director of Physicians Practice, and I'm joined by Peter Levin. And Peter is a man of many talents, but most recently he was the Chief Technology Officer and a Senior Advisor to the Secretary of the Department of Veterans Affairs. Is that right?
It's a mouthful, but you got it.
Yeah. So we're here to talk about a very specific technological solution to an old problem, which is how do you empower patients by giving them access to their own health information. And you guys came up with kind of a solution to that problem called Blue Button. Can you tell us a little bit about what the Blue Button is and how you developed it at the VA?
Sure. So the Blue Button is a personal health record. Today it contains the complete patient record that we hold at Veterans Affairs. It started in August of 2010 as, I would say, a more conventional PHR, and the way that we think of that is that all the information that you know about yourself, all the things that you put onto a clipboard when you're filling out the form during a clinical encounter. The genesis was remarkably simple. Basically, VA had a capability, had a system that allowed veterans to let us, VA, hold their information for them. That information that you fill out on a clipboard, medicines that you're taking, allergies that you know about, other aspects of your, or attributes of your medical history. And basically all we did was allow them to download that information for themselves. So you say, well, geez, that doesn't sound very hard. You could have done a screen scrape. It was not technically very hard, and absolutely you could have done a screen scrape. The first version of the Blue Button was all that information with all the HTML code and all the XML codes removed. Right. The reason that we thought it was so important was from a policy and operations perspective, we knew for sure that if we could make that information available to veterans, the information that they were giving us and that we were really just giving back to them, that we could come up with clever ways of attaching that file to the complete medical record. Okay. This is a medical record that's contained in a system called Vista. Vista is still today one of the most widely used and one of the most popular EHRs, electronic health record clinical system. And the big idea was to attach the Blue Button to Vista through some web-mediated data services. Okay. And that's the project that we completed just in January of this year.
And you know, I'm the editor of a physicians magazine, and I can tell you that I've been kind of waiting for personal health records to come around and, you know, sort of take the world by storm for at least 10 years. Yeah. Google has tried it, others have tried it. It doesn't seem like a terribly difficult concept, yeah, but it just hasn't really taken off in the private sector. Why do you think that is, and what do you think Blue Button offers that's different from those other personal health records that exist in the private sector?
So let me answer the second question first. I think the Blue Button was differentiated in two ways. First of all, it was just amazingly simple to use. Yeah. I mean, with the push of a Blue Button, you got all the information that we could give you about yourself, right? Again, starting with stuff that you had already told us, and then incrementally over about 2.5 years, we just kept adding data chapters. It was in a very sensibly laid out format. There was nothing canonical about it. You could change it, you could read it. It was your data, it was to do with what you wanted. So the simplicity of use, I think, is the first huge differentiation. The second was that the other services were asking people to share information to them. So, yes. So you had to upload things about yourself that you may or may not have remembered, that you may or may not have been able to find in a paper file, that you may or may not have been diligent about. And I don't know if you tried it. I mean, I tried to do this. I was like, well, geez, you know, I'm working on this thing. I ought to know something about it, right? Right. And it was difficult to use. It crashed, and there was no inherent value to it, right? There wasn't like I could use it to share
because it was
information.
just for you. It didn't connect with your physician. I mean, you could take it to your doctor,
right?
But they had their own record.
Yeah.
And they didn't care about what you were uploading to Google.
Right, right.
So it was like a diary.
It was almost like a diary. That's a really great way to put it. And so that isolation, and I don't want to slam on Microsoft or Google here, right? Because I really appreciated the fact, from a technologist perspective, I really appreciated the fact that they were working on this and they were trying. I would have predicted that it would have worked, but if we're trying to do the forensics now, retrospectively, well, what do you think really happened? I think that the use model was part of it, and then there was sort of this latent discomfort about the fact that you're sharing information with these large companies that have nothing to do with your health, right? I think that was an issue that of course we did not have at VA. I mean, we had all that information already, at least the big one, right? The EHR version of it,
right.
And veterans were using the My Healthy Vet service. We already had 1 million people on My Healthy Vet before we even started.
Right.
So it's I always tell people if you're going to launch a product, if you're going to launch a consumer product, this was my first one, right? I work more on infrastructure things. There are 2 things that you can do that can guarantee your success. First of all, make sure you have 1 million users on the first day of the launch.
Right.
And second of all, have the President of the United States announce it.
Yeah.
If you have those 2 things, you're golden.
Right. How much of the information in Blue Button is just automatically uploaded to Blue Button via the VA's own records, and how much does the vet and his family have to input into the system directly?
That's a great question. It's not a question I get a lot, and it's really a perfect question. So the short answer, which is not complete but mostly accurate, is nothing. The vet doesn't have to do anything.
Okay.
And when you start unpacking what I mean when I say that, so all the data, and this was the real accomplishment, all the data that is today available, the clinically valid, complete, comprehensive data that's in the Vista system, right now is dumped into the Blue Button file. So that should raise all kinds of, well, what about security? What about privacy? What about authentication? All that. Okay, so we're not going to probably have time to talk about that today.
Right.
Let me tell you that we took care of all that.
Right.
And it's a really rock solid solution. I got this job, and my background is cybersecurity, so that was something that I could personally put an imprimatur on. What the vet's duty to do, or their families or people that they trust, is that they need to register, and we've automated that process also. So you can't just say, well, I went to this VA hospital and you guys know me and I want my records. It's not quite as simple as that. And people say, well, that's just because VA is being bureaucratic again. It's not. It's because we really want to have some kind of either in-person authentication, which is one way of doing it, or we now have some web-mediated tools where we can use credentials, electronic credentials that you have in other trusted services. We can absorb those and we can use those to make your records available to you. So once you are in, you're golden. Once you're in, you're really in.
Right.
Getting in, we just want to make sure you are who you say you are.
Okay.
But the actual completeness of the record, that's all automagic. That happens behind the scenes. You don't need to worry about that.
And is there any opportunity or expectation on the part of the patient or his family between, say, visits to, let's say, I don't know, upload their weight or any other kind of
There's no expectation, no.
Own?
That's another great question. There's no expectation that they have to do that. Of course they can. And now, I don't know if you're following, there's this new development, sort of the next generation of Blue Buttons called Blue Button Plus, where we're trying to take the disparate and today isolated health records, all of which are being converted into Blue Button records, which is tremendously validating, right? I mean, you can't make that up. That's wonderful. But we want to make them so that they're interoperable, so that the record that you have in one health system, because you're getting specialized care or specialized services, or because you live in a different part of the country some time of the year, can be matched and married to other health information about you, and in a way that you have perfect control over. You can keep them separate if you want, but most people would like to have that complete record in one place or in one virtual place. And HHS and VA and the DoD, they're working on the mechanisms of doing that now.
Yeah. What is, I mean, you talk about how seamlessly the Blue Button PHR talks to and interacts with the Vista EHR. What is kind of where one stops and the other begins, or is that sort of not the right question?
So I say with affection, it's not the right question.
Okay.
But I love the question because there were a few accomplishments with Blue Button, right? And one of them is exactly what you just put your finger on. That somehow there was this cultural, societal, but otherwise completely synthetic notion that the PHR, the thing that you know about yourself, and the EHR, the thing that your doc knows about you, those are separate.
Right.
So I'm your doc. I'll just take care of it. Good that you know how many aspirins you took last week, right?
Right.
And what I think you're seeing, if you look at what's going on at the Health Data Palooza and the work of Farzad Mostashari and Todd Park, these are the real champions, the administration's champions of who is trying to, in a very deliberate way, deliberate, transparent, structured, open, but deliberate. We're going to make this happen. We're trying to blur the boundaries between those so that your doctor, now there's going to be exceptions. There are going to be some important exceptions.
Right.
We don't need to enumerate those now. But for most people, all information is going to be available to them at all times, and it's the same information that your doc has. Now, you may not want it all. You may not care. You may not understand. You may not need. That's your call. But the instant that you decide, something, I want a complete, comprehensive, clinically valid version of who I am and what I've done with my health history, you are entitled to that. And the VA, at least, is going to make sure that if you're a veteran getting health care there, that you're going to get it. But I would say even more importantly now, it's been adopted in the private sector. Kaiser now has announced that they've made Blue Button available. Aetna was the first provider to do so. Blue Cross Blue Shield is doing it for federal employees, and I think that they're going to do it in other places. So the really exciting part about what Blue Button has accomplished for veterans, I think, speaks for itself, but that it has spawned a movement in the private sector and really internationally. The Blue Button now is understood in countries, entire countries, as the place that you go to get your health information. That's a great testament to what we accomplished at VA.
And we're now seeing, thanks to stimulus funding and meaningful use regulations, huge uptake of EHR systems.
Yep.
What is your sense of the response by the EHR development community to this new kind of Blue Button PHR thing? And to what degree are they kind of making their systems, I mean, it's great that it's so seamless with Vista, but how well does it speak to GE centricity and all of the other kind of privately held EHRs that doctors are now going out and buying in the private world? Yeah,
so again, you're asking exactly the right question. It's a technical question, and it's not an easy one to answer in a compact way, but let me try in a couple of sentences, and we'll see if we get there. These systems are still isolated. Okay, let's just accept that as axiomatic. The systems are still isolated. The standards that we're supposed to enable interoperability aren't really standard. We're making progress there. I find it very frustrating and unsatisfactory, but it's better than the nothing that we had 3 years ago. So we'll accept that as our operating hypothesis. So what can you do to make sure that vendor A's system is talking to vendor B's system, right? Because at the end of the day, sometimes vendor A and vendor B are in the same hospital system.
Right.
So these guys are really freaked out, right? And sometimes they're in similar geographies, different parts of a city or different aspects of care, different profit centers, and they have the same problem. So you have two choices here. You can come along as the big bad government and enforce a standard that either you picked for yourself or that you imposed upon the vendors, which they may or may not accept, and you have no mechanisms of enforcement. So let's not go down that awful road, right? Or you can try something which, bluntly, we found to be very successful in the Blue Button implementation. The technical thing is you abstract the namespace. That's a fancy way of saying that you and I don't actually need to agree on each and every element, how to manually tie them up. We just need to agree at a higher layer of abstraction. When you say this, you mean that. And when I say this, I mean that.
Okay.
And there are very clever technical things that you can do where you have now actually industries that are not forcing these two systems together in a completely inoperable, expensive, wrong-minded, long-winded way, talking about long-winded, what they're doing is they're saying, okay, we're going to create a data broker that sits on top, and we're going to be the translation service between you, because then they can turn around, they can take that product and they can sell it in other places, and all they have to ever do is tweak it to the specific implementations.
Yeah.
So the short way, finally, of answering your question is abstract out the namespace and don't worry about direct integration.
And is that what's happening, or is that just sort of a concept?
Oh, hell no. No.
It's not happening.
No. You said what should happen, right?
Yeah, right.
Okay, no. I think that people are grappling with the issue, right? To put it diplomatically. There are some folks that are going to try to impose some standards, and look, I'm not against standards, right? I mean, I've made a very handsome living off of standards.
Yeah.
I think it's a worthwhile thing. What I'm against is waiting for standards when you have such a crisis of societal need. People are literally dying waiting for their health information. People are literally dying waiting for access to services, even once they have their health information. And anything that we can do from a technology perspective that accelerates that has unspeakable clinical, economic, from my perspective, transcendental good.
Yeah.
Right? So I think that the industry is going to play this out. I'm certainly out there pretty loudly about this abstraction layer. We did that at VA. That's how we got it to work in the first place. We were promoting that between the VA and the DoD. I'm pretty confident that that's going to work out one way or another. What happens in the private sector remains to be seen.
Yeah.
In the short term, people are using some of the standards, and that seems to be working okay.
Yeah. Let me pause for a moment just to kind of point out that even as we're talking about patient engagement, we really want to encourage audience engagement.
Absolutely.
So I don't want this to just be a conversation between Peter and myself. Please do raise your hand if you have questions, and I see one there, I think. Yes, sir.
I have two questions, Peter. Number one, the blue button. I happen to be a VA, a veteran, so I've interacted a little bit with the VA. Thank you. Someone said that I should hold off having all of my records from different outside doctors and hospitals uploaded because I'm preparing a claim, and there's a time lag for all that to get into the database at the VA, and it may basically mess up a claim application because not all the data is there when you do your review. So that's the first one. If you want to address that first.
Yep.
And the second one is, once you get all that data in, I, as a patient, think it's wonderful that I can go in and see what my white blood count cell is, or red blood count, or something else. But what's even more important is the trend analysis.
You bet.
Over the past 3, 5, 10 years.
Right.
Because in two situations that I've experienced, it was a trend analysis that led me to early intervention and cure rather than the spot measurement.
You bet.
At that time.
Yeah.
So if you could address those two, I'd appreciate it.
Absolutely. So the second question is softball. Which is that the achievement of the VA, DoD, and HHS in August of 2010 was to make that data available. It had not been available before, so I like to say it was infinitely better than the nothing that we had. And we've made, along a very steady, methodical, open path, the VA today is the only institution in the country that makes the entire patient record available to its patients, downloadable and shareable. So what you do with that data speaks to your second question, the trend analysis. We've got dates, we've got parameters, we've got metrics, right? Now, there are companies out there that have started to make blue button readers, and they will make that graphic interface for you. HHS sponsored an extraordinarily successful competition at the beginning of this year to give people an idea of what those graphical interfaces could look like and how they should behave and how they should be. I know that the VA is actually working on implementing one of those right now. I don't know when it'll be available. I'm not there since March 1st, but it's got to be soon, frankly, because it's simple and because it's really, really useful. So don't confuse things that you can do with the blue button, with the fact that the blue button is now available. It's sort of like saying, well, I sold you a car. It's your business whether you choose to drive it to New York or to Myrtle Beach, right? That's kind of up to you. You got to make some decisions there, and there are plenty of people who would like to sell you New York or Myrtle Beach. That's one way of answering the question. To your first question, which is hugely important and very delicate. I don't want to give you or anybody advice, technical or operational advice about when and how to submit a claim. There are people who do that, and they're professionals at it, and I'm not. You need to understand that right now, today, there is no blue button upload into the VA. That's coming, and it'll be there. But the blue button itself, the data that's contained in the blue button itself, is not part of the service disability claims evaluation process. It will be, and it will be when it's complete. Now, does that mean that it's useless from a compensation and claims perspective? Does the blue button solve the backlog? Yes, actually, it could. It certainly would help. I mean, it doesn't do it by itself. There's a lot of other things that are involved. But the thing that you could do as a choice, I'm not advocating that you do it, you have to talk to your VSO or to the person you're dealing with, the VA, is you can get all of your records in one place. So clearly, I mean, if it's not even a VA issue, if you're talking to your auto insurance, if you're talking about life insurance or health insurance or any other kind of institutional interaction, the more complete your information, the better service you're going to get and the better decision you're going to receive. That's also axiomatic, right? But what you could do is get all your information together in one place, Blue Button being a component of it today, and that's what you submit. Tomorrow, we're going to make that process really easy. Tomorrow, the VA and the DoD are going to be exchanging Blue Button information, never mind the information that's coming from the outside that's going to help the VSRs make a better decision. So not yet for Blue Button, but it's coming, and it's a component of the thing that you could put in for your claim.
Yes, sir.
So I'm interested in when commercial payers will, I'm interested in when, two questions. When will commercial payers and CMS implement Blue Button, number one? When is upload going to be a feature available in Blue Button? And when will you be then able to load the personal data from wireless devices, Fitbit, blood glucose meters, et cetera,
right, into
the record?
Right. All great questions. So the first one, when is CMS going to make the Blue Button available? It is available. VA was first to the line. CMS was literally a couple days behind us. So it ends up that CMS doesn't have the complete comprehensive, they don't provide clinical services, right? So you wouldn't have expected that kind of data to be in their file, but they do have claims data, which is enormously important and deeply rich data. It's useful for all different kinds of things, including in the clinic. And DoD was shortly after that. I think I lost track of all your other questions. Commercial. So the administration, which I don't speak for anymore, but I now cheer from the sidelines as a more than active observer. The administration is doing a lot of things simultaneously in terms of stimulating commercial interest, in terms of putting out grants and challenges, in terms of making sure that the startup community in particular, but the commercial industry in general, has tremendous access not just to the data, but to the protocols, to the standards making bodies, to Todd himself, right? I mean, these people are deeply, deeply committed in making sure that we are lifting up the last bastion of resistance to enterprise software, which is medical practice. So if you were at the Health Data Palooza this week, I don't know, another 2,000 people, I want to say 200 companies. It was a lot, and it's growing, and there's some that are already distinguishing themselves. They're differentiating themselves in terms of use models, number of users, capabilities. This is all on the way. Your last question with regards to social media, body media, not the company, but the device, and other kinds of things that you could do. I'm carrying a Fitbit with me right now. That's actually not for me, right? The VA is going to make that available when demand is high, or somebody else with a better instance. You know that this is going to happen, right? So, with a better instance of the Blue Button, one that's more usable, more transportable, more connected to other medical systems and services. I hope that the VA is not the first one, because that's going to answer your second question in a very affirmative way. When VA doesn't have the best blue button anymore, that means that the commercial industry has leapfrogged and made it even better, and we're going to put pressure back on the VA, all of us together, and say, hey guys, you started it, look at the revolution that you instigated, that you triggered, now you got to keep up. I want to have that conversation. They'll love that conversation.
So Peter has a hard stop. So maybe one more question from the audience?
One last one, yeah.
Real quick in the back there.
Thank you. My name is Albert Donne. I'm so glad you mentioned the blue button will, at phase 3 perhaps, or 4, become a two-way button, and we'll be able to upload. Can you tell us the history of the conversations at VA about adding the ability to flag or attempt to correct errors in the medical record? By analogy, when we were given access to our credit histories, very shortly thereafter, industry realized they had to give us a way to correct them, and I just can't imagine that VA could have thought that wouldn't be a request, yet it's causing frustration in the community because as of yet there's no way to even flag an error, never mind fix an error, and as a legal document, perhaps a patient should never be able to actually change the record.
Right.
When will they be able to flag an error?
That's a great question. Let me challenge the notion about the legality of the document, right? Mm-hmm. I've spent a lot of time today and in the last 3 years, and it was announced in August of 10, trying to promote the notion, the concept of it's your data, you should have the choice whether you want it or not. What you do with it, as we were discussing a few minutes ago, is utterly your decision and your call. The idea of being able to correct errors is something that we struggled with. We made the deliberate, and you can argue whether it was the right choice. I still think it was, but it's not an easy call. It was a judgment call about whether we had a minimally viable product. Should we have kept Blue Button back and not released this data to the public or to veterans because it didn't have really important things like fixing errors? And in the end, we decided that we should go with what we had. We should, even though there were gaps and holes, and I had a phone call yesterday from a veteran who reached out to me through my private email address and said, I can't get mine, who do I talk to, right? There's all different kinds of problems that we have not yet resolved. So, but I see that glass as half full, not half empty. If you find an error, what I would do is go back to my doctor and say, look, here's my Blue Button file. The root of this data is something that you have control over. Would you please fix it? Just like you would if you were getting your Blue Button data from Kaiser. Kaiser doesn't have this either, or Aetna, or WellPoint. Just one of the commercial payer providers, or United Health, for crying out loud, who are making the Blue Button available but also don't have that ability to allow the patient to actually make corrections to the health record. You would do that with your doctor. The veterans will do that also at the VA.
Okay. Well, Peter, thank you so much. You do
Thank
have
you
a hard
so
stop.
much.
I promise to get you out of here on time, and I'm going to keep that promise.
Okay.
Thank you all. And I'm not sure who's next, but I think we'll move forward. So thanks, Peter, so much.
Thanks, everybody.
All right.